Okay, thank you everybody for your patience. A little technical difficulties, but we got through it. So my name is Brandon Wilkes. I'm the education coordinator here at the Haynes Library. Thank you everyone for coming tonight and for showing up on Zoom. I won't talk very long because we're running a little bit behind. But Armchair Travel Series is going on all the way through April. And if everyone else ever has any ideas for something like to share or a program they'd like to do, please get in contact with me here at the library and we'll see what we can do about facilitating that for you. So without any further ado, Thom Ely will be talking about his trip to Russia's Far East,
Russia and Mongolia.
All right, let me switch this over and I will go away.
And I'll probably need you if something happens.
I will stay. I will stay very close by.
And I'll just hit play when I'm ready to go.
And you should be all set.
Okay.
All set.
Oh, full screen?
Okay, early exit. Oh, here we go, here we go. All good now? Now I will go away. Thom.
Okay. Thanks for coming out tonight. This trip was from 2016, and it was my fourth round the world excursion. And it all came about because my cousin Bill wanted to do a fly fishing trip in Mongolia. And we'd been to Kamchatka in 2013 on a fly fishing trip. And that was my first time flying across the Bering Strait on a Russian airline called Yakutia, who had one flight a week from Anchorage to Petropulask, Kamchatsky, which is on the Kamchatka Peninsula. It's a 4.5-hour flight. And both times I took the flight, it was crystal clear, blue skies, and you take off out of Anchorage. You head straight across the Bering Strait, which we know is only 60 miles wide. And then you go down the coast, east coast of Russia, which is incredibly wild and remote. And there's no roads, no communities that I could see. And then you fly down the Kamchatka Peninsula and you land at Petropulask, which up until the early 1990s was closed to all foreigners and most Russians because it's where the Russian submarine fleet is based. And as we all know, there's a lot going on in Russia right now, a lot of pain and a lot of suffering in Ukraine. And there's lots about the Soviet Union that I believe Putin is trying to resurrect. But this show is more about the people of the area, the region, and the environment, which is it's amazing and fantastic. My first trip to Russia was in 1991 when I was on a round the world trip going to the east. And I landed in Moscow without a visa. I gave $300 to the immigration guys, and I had a hotel room in a business hotel in Moscow, all my meals, and it cost me $300 and a bottle of Bailey's Irish Cream. So I spent 10 days in Moscow in 1990. The Soviet Union had dissolved. There'd been a coup by the communists to reinstate it. That coup failed. There were all these business people rushing to Moscow to joint venture with Russians, and I was wined and dined by Russian business folks for the 10 days I was there. I met these men that lived in Irkutsk, which is on Lake Baikal, and they said, you must come to Irkutsk and we can do bike tours and we will start a business together and it's beautiful and wonderful. And that kind of lodged in my mind that someday I wanted to go to Lake Baikal and see this area. So when my cousin proposed this fishing trip to Mongolia, I looked at Yakutia Airlines schedule, and the last flight from Anchorage to Petropulask was August 29th. So I booked that one-way flight, and then I booked a ticket on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. So I flew from Petropulask up to Karbarovsk and got on the Trans-Siberian Railroad, and then it was 4 days on the train to Ulan-Ude, which is a city on the eastern side of Lake Baikal. And from there, I biked about 300 miles up the coast of the lake, and then returned back to Ulan-Ude, got on a bus, went down to Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, did the fly fishing trip with my cousin for 10 days. And then I spent 2 weeks biking around Mongolia through this remote area where there were just dirt roads and small villages. And then at the end of that trip, I took the train back up to Irkutsk, saw the other side of Lake Baikal, the western side, spent a few days there, stayed with a local family. And then I was going to take the train all the way from Irkutsk to Moscow, but I didn't really want to spend another 6 days sitting on the train. So I flew from Irkutsk to Moscow and spent 5 days in Moscow in 2016. And from 1991, when I was there, right as the Soviet Union fell, to 2016, the city was a completely different place. All the Gucci shops, all the jewelry stores, all the opulence, all the money had flooded into Moscow. And it looked like any other metropolitan city. So things had changed quite a bit. This show is just going to focus on Russia and Mongolia. I did continue on to France and then biked in France and then flew back to the States. But this is on the first part of the trip. So we'll get started here. And I'm not sure about the timing, but so here's the map of Alaska over to Russia. You can see Anchorage here. I flew across to the southern tip of the Kamchatka Peninsula, which is right here, Petropulask. This is the airport on the tarmac. The spine of the peninsula is all volcanoes, very wild country. When I did my fishing trip over there, I saw more bears than I ever saw in Alaska. From there, I flew to Karbarovsk, this red dot here, which is the northern end of the Trans-Siberian Railroad. It's on the Amur River, which is a big river that flows out to the ocean. And here you see a general overview. This is Lake Baikal right here, and this is Ulan-Ude. And this is Karbarovsk. There's some Russian soldiers out there marching around. I didn't see a lot of military presence in Eastern Russia, but every once in a while you'd see a facility. Lots of churches, very opulent, beautiful, well taken care of, restored. This is the riverfront. There's a walkway, promenade that goes along. The river looked brown and dirty and just very wide.
I'm sorry, what town are you in?
This is Karbarovsk.
It's the first part of the train.
This is where I got on the train.
Okay.
Yeah. People fishing in the river. This was a Turkish restaurant I went to. So it's very metropolitan, international type of city. There's a lot of mining in the area and things like that. This is the train station, which I identified so I wouldn't know how to get there because my train left in the middle of the night. So I rode my bike out there. Getting on the train was a bit of a ordeal with my bike bag. There's these matrons that run the train cars, and she was screaming at me that I couldn't get my bike into the car, but I managed to wedge it in there. And then at each stop, I would get off, walk around. I was in a car with one other guy, this guy right here. And so they would get out and smoke at every stop. And this woman was from Macedonia. She spoke English, so she would interpret for me with my compartment mate. This is the compartment. He was usually crashed out. This is my bed over here. And we just kind of watched the forest scenery go by, and train doesn't move that fast. This is Lake Baikal, and this is Ulan-Ude right here, which is the city. I biked up to this island right here. It's a national park. There's the massive Lenin head, which is Ulan-Ude is known for. And they were celebrating their 350th anniversary of the city. This is part of Burat, which is a Mongol kind of autonomous region. And the people are Buddhists. And so they study Buddhism. And this was a kind of a commemoration of the history of the Cossacks coming in and taking over the region. And it was about the 1700s when they added on. This is a hookah bar in the city. Everybody's smoking the hookah pipes. And I spent about 2 days here before I got loaded up on my bike and got ready to pedal out of Ulunnade and up the east shore of Lake Baikal. This is the scenery along the way. There's Russian Orthodox churches, and then there's Buddhist temples kind of scattered about. This is kind of what the villages look like. Very rustic, wooden tin roofs. Nothing too fancy, except for when the money would come in, you'd see these dhaka houses. This is where I stayed. It was a little lakeside resort for a night. I had all my camping gear with me. I figured the first night I would befriend this cat. And we were buddies for the evening. This is the beachfront, the village. And that's my Surly long haul trucker touring bike. Great bike for this excursion. I've taken all over the world. Lots of smoked fish there. It's like a white fish. It's called Oman. And they catch it in nets out in the lake. There was a medical conference going on and they invited me to join them, and lots of shots of vodka, great food. There's about 100 people there. I got to hang out and have some fun. This was a little kind of shanty where this guy was living on the beach in the shack. So it's very rural. You don't see a lot of money in this area. So Lake Baikal, and let me just pause for a minute. Oh, there we go. This is a picture of one of the, the rich Russians who go and build their beachfront house. Pause. Oh, there we go. So Lake Baikal is the largest freshwater lake in the world. It holds 20% of the world's fresh surface water. All the Great Lakes combined aren't as great a volume as Lake Baikal. It's over a mile deep. It's 400 miles long and 50 miles wide. And it's a rift valley lake where two continental plates come together. So that's why it's so deep. It's one of the oldest lakes on the planet, 25 to 30 million years old. It has over 2,000 endemic species that aren't found anywhere else in the world, and they're still discovering new ones there. The water is pretty much pristine, although there is some pollution at the southern end, but you can drink right out of the lake. And the Russians love to go camping. So there's all kinds of great little beach camping spots along the way. And they come and they set up their camp and their steam baths and things like that. So I found some wonderful places to camp. This was September, and mostly when I was there, and it's like after Labor Day, people don't camp anymore. So it was really quiet. There weren't many people around. So I pretty much had the place to myself. So I found my favorite beaches and little coves and camped there for a night or two as I worked my way up the shore of the lake. This one place I was at, I found this kind of what you would call a hobo camp, kind of a shanty built out of driftwood up on this hill. And there wasn't anybody around. And I started looking around and I saw like these vegetables had rolled down the hill. There was like an onion, beautiful onion. So I picked it up, brought it back to my camp. And then about an hour later, this Russian guy with kind of blonde dreads shows up, and he obviously doesn't speak any English, and he's kind of giving me the smoke sign, like, you got to smoke? And I'm like, no, I don't smoke. And then he's like, got anything else? So I dug in my pocket and I pulled out a ruble and I gave it to him. And I figured he was going off to town to get cigarettes. So he took off. And then later that night, it was getting dark. I had this fire and I just got in my tent. And I hear these two voices kind of arguing with each other really loudly. And I'm like, shit, they're coming back. They're going to like jump me or something because they think I got money. So I'm like huddled in my tent, and I'm listening to them yelling back and forth. And pretty soon I realized it was the same guy having an argument with himself, yelling at himself. And so I'm like, oh shit, it's weirdo, he's going to attack me or whatever. So I spent most of the night not sleeping well. And then I got up in the morning and just packed my stuff and got out of there, but I never saw him again. But I thought he might have thought I stole his onion or something. Let's see here.
That's your tent.
This is my camp. Yep. So I rode up the east side and rode back the way I'd come, and the place that I enjoyed the most to camp, which was this place. I spent 2 days there. It's a little mushroom man. The mushroom season was going on. It was just incredible. The mushrooms and the roadside stands selling mushrooms, and it's a big part of the culture there. And so I got these packets of ramen that were about 7 cents a piece, and I got some dried meat, and then I'd get a fresh mushroom and chop it up and make this little stew every night. And I did swim in the lake. The water was cold, but you could jump in. There's some mushrooms. And I was doing about 40 to 50 miles a day. And sometimes you could be off the main road and get on these little dirt roads that kind of went along the shore of the lake. So I'd get off and ride on those.
Are these spruce?
They are spruce, and there's pine, and it's kind of like a boreal forest kind of environment, you know, fairly dry. Everybody was out getting ready for winter, cutting wood, putting fish away, things like that. So a lot of the similar things that we do here in Alaska. I'd stop at these little roadside stands where they'd have like crepes and potato pancakes and things like that. But it's pretty simple. These are fishing shacks along the river. So lots of salmon, not salmon, but a trout species that's a salmon type. And then this is the park I was in. Let me go back one there. It's a big national park that it juts out into the lake. So I went on a hike up to this mesa from the lake shore. And as you can see, it's a gorgeous day. You could see all the way as far as you could see. It looked like the ocean. The lake, you know, was so huge. And somebody had planted a Russian flag up there at the top. This was a little observatory tower that was built out of wood along the beach that I climbed up into. And that was some of the hardest riding I did because it was a sand road and it was all rutted, like with heaves and stuff. So it was slow going. I met this local guy who was building a little steam hut on the beach called a banya. And so similar to what we do here for a steam bath outside, you cover it with tarps, and then they cut birch, fresh birch boughs. And after you're sweating, you're supposed to beat the person on the back with the birch boughs to get the fluids flowing and stuff. Lots of berries. I ate a lot of blueberries and cranberries and some good foraging. Then there was this little like a krill kind of shrimp, freshwater shrimp that washed up one day, and it was just all over the beach, and the birds were coming in and feasting on it. This is so this is a skeleton of a Lake Baikal seal. It's a freshwater seal. It's only in this lake, and the population, they don't really know, maybe there's 200 or 300 of them. They're not sure how they got here. They think at one point they may have migrated from the ocean and then adapted to the freshwater. But they're one of the native species of the Lake Baikal area. Anytime I'd meet people, they'd invite me to have food with them. And if they spoke any English, we'd get a few words out. I did have a translation app but since I didn't have cell service, I couldn't use it. It was unfortunate the amount of trash that was scattered around. In Russia, you pack it in and you leave it there. You just dig a hole in the sand and throw your trash in, and it blows around. And roads were good, nice, smooth asphalt, mostly on the main roads for biking. And then I headed down to Ulaanbaatar from Ulan-Ude here, and this is Mongolia. This is the border right here. And Mongolia became independent in, I think it was the early 90s, out of their Russian influence. This was a local bike shop. Guy had his cycling jersey on. Lots of great markets selling all kinds of good dried fruit and the type of thing you see in countries, kind of an open market. We went to this performance of Mongolian classical music, which was quite entertaining. Traditional instruments, the dancers were amazing. And then they had the contortionists, which, yeah, what they could do with their bodies was like, so you couldn't imagine. Yeah, I didn't think bodies could bend like that. Then we flew out of Ulaanbaatar on our fly fishing trip. This is a city. It's big, somewhat polluted, kind of a modern Asian city. Flying over the countryside, we were heading northeast towards the Russia border to a river called the Onon River that you could see it in the distance there. And then we were floating down the river for 7 days on this fly fishing trip with a company called The Fly Shop based out of California. So it was a mix of Western guides and local guides. That's my cousin Bill. We're in these drift boats. So one guide rowing and one of each of us in the front and the rear. And it was gorgeous scenery, nice fall weather. And so we were fishing for these fish that are native to Russia, Eastern Russia, and Mongolia. They're called taimen, T-A-I-M-A-N. They're the largest trout in the world, salmonoid species. They get up to 8 feet long, and they're like prehistoric in a way. They have they almost look like a pike with a long snout. But the thing about, if you're a fly fishing person, about catching them, their mouths are all bone. So traditionally, when you go to set a hook, you lift the tip of the rod to set the hook. But if you did that with these fish, it just popped right out. So you had to hold the rod down like this and do a strip set, which was yank the line really hard to set the hook into the jawbone. And once the hook was in the jawbone, then you could, play the fish. And this is all in a park area, so it was all catch and release. And the fish had been pretty much wiped out during the communist years, and then they'd been working on recovering them for the past 30 years or so. So they are starting to come back. So there were 10 of us on the trip, 5 guides. We had about 5 boats, and then there was a whole crew that took the camp downriver each day and set it up. So we had a cook tent, we had a dining tent, we had little teepees with cots and big Mongolian wool blankets because it got pretty cold at night. And then we were catching these taimen and then also amur trout and some other species. So it was incredible fly fishing. I grew up fly fishing in New England with my cousin Bill and my uncles. And this was over the top. It was just, these fish fought like you would not believe, just super, super aggressive. So that's me landing one. This was a small one. This was like probably 28 to 30 inches or so. And they would, put up a good fight. So we'd fish all day out of the boats, sometimes from shore, and then at night they'd set up this camp and have incredible meals and shots of vodka and all the other stuff that goes along with being out there and kind of high-end fly fishing trips. These are the rafts that the staff rode with all the gear in them. And that's me and my cousin. He actually made a painting of this photo and gave me a copy of it. So this was the big moment on the last day on the trip. We came down into this eddy and my cousin was in the bow and he cast his line out and he hooked a nice fish, probably like a 30-inch or so. And as he's starting to bring it in, all of a sudden, this huge boil comes up around it. We see the head of this larger fish trying to eat his fish that was on the hook because they're very aggressive. They'll like attack any fish. And so he landed his fish and the guide's yelling at me, "It's still there, it's still there. Throw your fly, throw your fly." And so I cast out about enough line from here to the wall, which was just a little more than the tip of the line. And I had this big white streamer on and I start pulling it in. All of a sudden, I got it. This fish started just ripping the line out and it had started heading out to the current. And I'm fighting it and the guide's like trying to help me, get the boat maneuvered. And, I was about ready to jump out on the bank and he's like, "No, don't jump out of the boat. If you jump out of the boat, we have to chase it." And so I fight this fish for like 20, 25 minutes and I'd get a little bit of line in and then I'd make a run. And my job was trying to keep it out of the current. And so the guide's out of the boat and he had the net and he's standing, there's a little kind of bank and I get the fish just up and he gets the net under it and scoops it in. And it is over 4 feet long. So it's like 52 inches or something. So it was the biggest fish caught of the trip. And it just happens, all the other boats come down at the moment I landed it. And so all the other folks on the trip are, checking it out and taking pictures and stuff. But it was a super exciting moment. And it was really fun to catch it. So we took the pictures, massaged it, and then sent it back into the river. And then we took off in the plane and headed back to Ulaanbaatar. End of that trip, my cousin headed back to Connecticut. And I spent a day in Ulaanbaatar before I got on a local train and headed out to the west to a little city called Iridat. It's right here. And then my plan was to bike from there across this roadless area down south through this province to another small town, basically. I just picked 2 points on the map and decided I would bike between them, not really knowing what was out there. But I had all my camping gear, I was loaded up. So I'm on the paved road here, and about 20 miles later, I turn off left onto a dirt road and start going across the grassland. So Mongolia doesn't have any trees. It's all grass and mountains. And nomadic herding is the traditional lifestyle there. So this is when I start heading off, and I didn't realize that there's more than one road. There's like spider webs of roads. I ended up running out of water, and I didn't have any source of water. And so I ended up at these are called gairs, which are the traditional, they're like yurts, and they're covered in cotton batting and stuff. The families actually, in the old days, they would load it all up on horses and move with the grass to a new grazing area. Now they load it all in the back of a truck and drive to a new grazing area. So I get off my bike and I walk with my water bottle over towards this woman and just water, and she welcomes me over and points to a barrel of water, and I fill up my bottle, and then she beckons me to come inside. And the next thing I know, they're feeding me and they want me to spend the night, and they're serving me tea, and they don't speak any English. I don't speak any Mongolian, but we were managing to converse. But I did figure out that the kids were their children's kids. So these are the grandparents, and they were taking care of the little ones while the parents were off working or doing something, because they showed me pictures on the wall. So I spent the night with them, wonderful hospitality. And then the next morning I got on the bike and headed on my way. And it was like that anytime I stopped anywhere. People would welcome me in, offer me food, a bed, just super happy people. And the kids are always curious about you because a lot of them hadn't seen, foreigners before. But really, yeah, really fun kids with pink rosy cheeks.
And they have animals and they're herders.
Oh, what's that?
They are herders.
They're herders, yes.
So
They have cattle.
cattle.
Yeah. And so they move around based on what's been grazed and what hasn't been grazed. It is a culture that's disappearing in Mongolia. Like everywhere else, the kids are moving into the cities, getting city jobs. And so they're losing their culture as well. Anytime you'd come into a village, even if it was like tiny, there'd be a big like sign announcing the name of the village. So before I went on this trip, I consulted with a local Western guy who runs a guiding service in the area. And he told me, sure, you can bike through there, but in October, these storms come down from Siberia and it can snow 3 feet overnight and you might get stuck. And so anytime it started to snow, I'd panic because I think, okay, I'm going to get stuck and I'm going to be pushing my bike through snow drifts for like 40 miles or something. Fortunately, it never snowed more than a couple inches while I was there. So I was able to bike through it. Lots of little beautiful places to camp. It's just kind of wide open. I was really lucky that the wind didn't blow during this whole trip, because if the wind had been blowing, it could have been really, really rough because it's just so exposed. And horses are giving way to motorbikes. So a lot of the local guys used to ride horses, but now they ride motorbikes. I ran into these two guys as I was heading through an area. Then this Australian guy is out there wheat farming. I stayed with him for a couple of days. He's got a grant from the government of Mongolia to start this wheat harvest. So he was harvesting his wheat. And it was probably like around 30 degrees or so. This is one of the little villages, pretty basic. They use coal for power. So that's what those smokestacks are. This was the only motel I stayed in the whole time I was out on this trip. Super basic, but yeah, it was a bed. And yeah, lots of wonderful images of people out living their life on the grasslands. This was another gathering. So they drink fermented mare's milk, which is horse milk that's been fermented, and it's like 3% alcohol. So I would always get a big cup of that anytime I came inside to visit. And that's traditional Mongolian attire and mode of transportation there. There's another one. But fortunately, my phone worked for navigation, even though I had no cell signal. So I would see the little dot and kind of figure out which direction to go. This was the last little town I stayed in before I bussed back to Ulaanbaatar. I found this beautiful hot spring, which I spent a couple days at. It was just amazing, gorgeous water. It was nearby to the little village there. And that felt good after being out biking for a couple of weeks across the steppe. And this was a Buddhist site that's in Mongolia I stopped at on the way back. And then I arrived in Irkutsk, where I stayed with like a homestay family, which was kind of strange, but I was only there for a couple of nights. So they decided we'd make pizza. And that's the husband. The wife kind of just disappeared when I got there, but I hung out with her husband and the 2 kids. And then I went over to the other side of Lake Baikal from where I was before. So now I was on the west side, which is more developed and more touristy than the east side. These are some of the traditional houses there, all wooden houses with tin roofs, lots of ornate carving and stuff on the windows. And lots of smoked fish, little markets selling local goods. They use toothpicks to kind of spread out the fish body, think so it dries better. And then I ended up in Moscow. And this was, I was there for about 5 days and went to all the traditional sites. That was Red Square. And I just noticed the difference from 1991 till 2016. It was like a different place. And yeah, I don't think there's going to be lots of visitors going to Moscow in the near future. I was also in St. Petersburg with my mom in 2019. We were on a cruise. So yeah, that's one of their old cannons in the Kremlin there. And that's it. Yeah, you're welcome.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
How did you handle the vodka drinking?
You had to disappear. So with them, a bottle of vodka, you finish it, and you have to have 3 people. Yeah. And then they'd open another one. So you just kind of had to go out the back door and not tell anybody when you were done.
So that trip when you said, oh, I just took off, I picked 2 towns to go from here to there. You didn't know if there was going to be a road or not?
No, because people there, because you can drive anywhere. It's all grassland. So they just take their vehicles and go off. So there'll be a road will start and then it'll spider out in like 15 different directions. And that's the hard part. You got to determine which part, which spider leg you're supposed to go on. But because the valleys are so wide and it's just hard dirt and grass, the roads just develop wherever people drive.
Do you mind? We had a map on there and you just kind of went over and said, well, then I went from here to there. It looked like there was a river running through, but a valley. Did you get across the river?
There were bridges wherever there were, yeah, where there were crossings, there were bridges and stuff. But yeah, it's to the south of southern Mongolia is desert. And then the north is more kind of rolling mountains and rivers and grasslands. But yeah, it's a beautiful country. I would go back there again. I don't know if they're worried about getting invaded by Russia as well. There was crossing the border, going into Mongolia was easy. Coming back into Russia took 3 hours. We had to get off the train and then stand around, and it looks like they just kind of look at you and look at your passport and look at you and look at your passport for like 40 minutes. And then they type a little something in, they'd look at you again, look at your passport. So
when you said you went into Russia with $300 and no visa, you just basically bribed your way.
yeah, 1991. So
gutsy.
I went to London planning on getting my visa to go into Russia. And I went to the Russian embassy in London, and there was a line about 6 miles long of people trying to get visas. So I said, screw it. And then when I got to the airport, I just talked to the immigration guy, and he said, bottle of Bailey's and $300 and you're in. So
You had the Baileys with you?
I went over to the duty free shop and bought a bottle at the airport and then brought it back across and gave it to the guy.
Oh, my.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it was interesting because I had sockeye cycle then, and as a business person, and like, oh, you're an American businessman. And so I was just out every night with like big groups of, Russians, and it was like caviar and vodka and champagne. And yeah,
You were just got adopted.
I was, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, when I changed my $100 bill in 1991 into rubles, I got a grocery bag of rubles like this high and this wide. So the whole 10 days I was in Moscow, I spent like $30. And so you couldn't take rubles out of the country then. And so when I got back to the airport, I had to turn them all back into dollars. I had a grocery bag full of money. Yeah.
Pretty sure that's what it's worth now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Maybe the Baileys and trick would work again.
probably.
So
Yeah.
Tom, how did you get from the east side to the west side? Did you fly?
Of the lake?
Yeah.
So I went from the east side, Ulan-Ude, by train to Mongolia.
Yes. Yeah.
Ulaanbaatar. Actually, I went by bus on the way down. And then on the way back, I went by train from Ulaanbaatar to Irkutsk.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So the Trans-Siberian Railroad runs across Russia, but it also runs down through Mongolia and into Beijing to China, another, spur of it. And then there's a northern, like industrial railroad that goes in the far north through all the mining districts that hauls mining ore and stuff. Yeah.
I have a question about your bicycle and just looking at some of the terrain that you were riding across in Mongolia. And it surprises me that this really did so well off-road.
Yeah, well, it was really hard packed dirt for the most part. I mean, I really didn't, in Mongolia, there really wasn't any sand. Sand was hard, like in around Lake Baikal, and some of the side roads were sandy. But in Mongolia, it was like hard, almost like asphalt, hard packed dirt. But the Mongolians would toss their vodka bottles out the window of their vehicles as they're driving across these dirt roads. And so there was like glass everywhere. I'm really surprised I didn't get a flat tire.
You didn't get a flat tire.
No, so there was like a lot of broken glass. Yeah. And then I read about this paraglider who was paragliding in Mongolia. It was like a month before I got there, and he landed out somewhere in the middle of nowhere and he got murdered. Yeah. And
You read
so
about that after?
I heard about it while I was there. Yeah. And so I was like, and I ran into a few drunk Mongolians. I just like, whoa, I'm getting out of here, that were kind of a little bit aggressive towards me, but otherwise people were, super accommodating and friendly. And anytime I would stop, I'd get invited in for tea and food, and, if I needed a bed.
Yeah. How did you do with the language barrier? You mentioned the map, but-
I had a Mongolian phrase book and a Russian phrase book. And then where I had a wireless Wi-Fi, I had a translation app that worked. But yeah, it was a lot of just kind of hanging out and smiling and right. Yeah.
Water bottle.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it was a good trip.
That looks like you got some questions in chat.
Okay.
Click on that.
I bet after a few bottles of vodka, your Russian got a lot better.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't have to type, you can answer. They can hear you.
Oh, they can? Oh, okay. Oh, Mardell. Mardell's question was, when you say it was very different than in 1991, how specifically? 1991, it felt like it was 1920s. It was like Eastern Europe, East Berlin, after the wall fell. There was like opulence of the West, capitalism versus, government structure, communism, whatever. Yeah. And so in 1991, there were bread lines. I didn't really see homeless people when I was there in 2016 in Moscow. And there was, obviously lots of wealth and, cafes and things. And I saw like young people hanging out, and I didn't really see that in 1991. And then the quit sharing. Oh, if you close your computer screen, we will be able to see you better.
Stop share.
Stop share. Oh, stop share. Okay. There we go. What else do we have here? I think that's it.
Might scroll up just to make sure.
Oh,
Okay.
all right. Thanks for coming. Nice to have a little in-person event. And yeah, there's always another place in the world to go on a bike tour.
So Tom, the fish that was in that market, was it salt? Cure?
What's that, Lisa?
The market that you showed there towards the end with the had to fix the fish.
Yeah.
Was it salt?
Yeah, it was brined and smoked. It was like a white fish. Yeah, they're small. They're only like this big, and they catch them in these fine nets. You just see them out there in the lake. Yeah, they're delicious. Yeah.
So there's probably no vegetables, right? You're just eating meat.
Not a lot of vegetables, no. So yeah, in Mongolia, the way the Mongolians conquered the world was meat and milk. They were they won over the what they call them, the grain eaters. Grains don't give you energy. It's meat and milk. Yeah. So I ate a lot of meat and milk and potatoes. Lots of potatoes.
In Mongolia?
In Mongolia too, yeah, the
Also, they
potatoes.
eat garlic.
They seem to have potatoes. Yeah, I don't know where they get them, but yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you flew your bike over?
I did, yeah. I had it in a bike bag, which worked like a check bag.
Oh, so you had it here. You brought it from here to there?
Yes.
Now it lives on the East Coast.
Yeah, and then
went
it
around.
stayed on the East Coast
I see.
after that trip.
Started here.
Yeah. Yeah, it was one of our old touring bikes, sockeye cycles. Yeah, steel frame. I didn't have any bike issues, no flat tires, nothing. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. What? September and October. Yeah.
So you're right and dark, otherwise, I'm trying to figure out the latitude. Day, 12
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to have a-
All right, great job.
Thanks. Want to inject that?
Do you happen to stop in a community called Bender on the Onondaga River?
Vendor. I don't think so, no.